Good afternoon. Welcome to this final session of today, the open presentation of participatory projects. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly a pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon in this final segment of a very interesting and interactive day. I'd first of all like to thank the government of the Czech Republic for hosting this event and inviting us all to be here. As my colleagues earlier said in the session, time is of the essence, and we are pressing on with the agenda's implementation. It's crucial for us to not lose sight of what is important. Societies can only withstand the multitude of challenges today and tomorrow if they're based on open participation, equality, and respect for human rights and the environment. Inclusion is indeed at the heart of the 2030 Agenda. Transparent, participatory, and accountable governance is also critical for inclusive social and economic development, environmental sustainability, and peace. Critically, progress in achieving the SDGs will be greatly enhanced by making sure that all voices are heard, lessons are shared, and best practices are replicated. We talked a lot earlier today about taking the good examples and best practices, and our challenge is being able to take them to scale. Today's meeting, as we prepare for the 2018 ECOSOC special meeting, has highlighted several initiatives at the local and national level, spearheaded by governments as well as civil society, and exemplifying the principle of inclusion. We've heard of groundbreaking approaches to city building, inspiring work promoting women's empowerment, efficient and secure use of new technologies to promote social inclusion, transparency, and sustainable solutions, and initiatives empowering schools and communities. The objective of this open session is to provide an opportunity for you as participants to contribute ideas and to make any presentations that you may have come to Prague with today. And just to let you know, there will be no attribution in the final summary. So we are here to make presentations. I would ask that if you wish to speak, that you just indicate your flag. We've already been advised that the representative of China would like to make a presentation, and also the representative of Spain. So any other representatives here, we have UNEP, would like to make a presentation, then please just indicate. Okay, so let me start by inviting the representative to China. He'll do a PowerPoint presentation, which I believe that you would like to deliver using the rostrum. So welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Undersecretary. It's really a pleasure for me to be here together with my colleagues to discuss about Agenda 2030. I think just about less than 10 minutes ago, I heard some unconfirmed rumors from my friends in capital saying that the North Korean Supreme Leader, Kim Jong-un, is on a train trip to China, to Beijing. It's not confirmed yet, but it's really stealing lots of limelight from the international society, which is more, I think, surprising than the news we heard last Friday before I came here when President Trump announced his surprisingly 60 billion tax kind of rift with China. So it seems that China is stealing lots of international attention and limelight now and in the coming few days. But my personal thinking is that that's not our topic today. But I think the Agenda 2030 is the topic today. And China's contribution, implementation of Agenda 2030 should really get more attention and limelight from the international media. So I would like to share with my colleagues very briefly about China's implementation and our lessons and experiences we learned over the past 2 years. As everybody is aware that Agenda 2030 is the most important, I think, international agenda on the political agenda items of all the leaders, because it overpasses all the aspects of social, economic, environment, all the areas. And as for the implementation of Agenda 2030, of course, we can view it at two levels, domestic level and the international level. So at the domestic level, the government should play a very important, a prominent role, together with other stakeholders, as the academia, private sector, NGOs, youth, etc. Of course, at the international level, while I think UN should play the key and a core role in implementing this agenda, where ECOSOC and UNTESA will lie in the very center for implementing this process. And I have prepared a small PPT here to share with you. Over the past, I think since the year 2015, especially the UN summit, marking the 70th anniversary, our President Xi Jinping also attended together with the 160 other leaders, and they adopted this agenda. And over the past more than 2 years, China, especially Chinese government, working vigorously to promote the implementation of all these goals in all areas. And we have achieved some early harvest and some progress, where I think we're going to show you a short video clip to see the progress we have been made so far. This video will last for about 30 minutes. Sorry, it's a Chinese version, but you can have the subscript. 可以。
可持续发展议程进展报告体现中国率先落实可持续发展议程的决心和担当，为全球落实进程贡献中国智慧和中国方案。报告显示，中国在部分优先领域已取得重要早期收获。中国确立2020年前消除绝对贫困的目标，2016年全年减少农村贫困人口1240万，2017年还将再减少1000万贫困人口，有望提前10年实现减贫领域可持续发展目标。2016年，中国政府制定《健康中国2030规划纲要》，提出全民健康的根本目标。中国在孕产妇、婴儿和5岁以下儿童死亡率方面，已提前实现相关可持续发展目标，并实现基本医疗服务全覆盖。中国已经形成层次完整、类别齐全的教育体系，教育普及率已达到中高收入国家平均水平。中国积极推进供给侧结构性改革，深入开展大众创业、万众创新。2016年，中国 GDP 增长6.7%，对全球经济增长的贡献率超过30%。在扎实推进本国落实工作的同时，中国积极倡导更加平等均衡的全球发展伙伴关系，大力推进“一带一路”国际合作，为其他发展中国家落实可持续发展议程提供力所能及的资金、技术和能力建设支持。2017年8月，中国正式启动国际发展知识中心，致力于为开展发展理论研究、交流发展经验，搭建有益平台。落实可持续发展议程是国际社会的共同责任。面向未来，中国将秉持5大发展理念，全面深入推进落实工作。中国愿与国际社会一道，携手努力，共同建设一个人人免于匮乏、获得发展、享有尊严的美好世界。
Okay, sorry for the Chinese version. I think I got the wrong version here. But I think it's just simply give you a very outline of our China's progress been made over the past 2 years. And so last year we issued this paper, this report, covering all these aspects of the SDG. And so I just give you a few numbers, I think more symbolic numbers showing the progress we made. Of course, as for GDP, we improved quite a lot. Renminbi 82, that's equivalent to about $12 trillion. And this is quite a big number. I mean, for the people living out of poverty, for the year alone, it's about 12.87 million. And over the past 5 years, altogether, we lifted more than 68 million people out of poverty. And we have a more ambitious goal. That is, by the year 2020, we will lift all the people above the poverty line. So that's a very daunting and challenging task. But I think we have this determination to fulfill that. And also other progress, especially I think in the area of pollution. I'm a resident in Beijing, so many of my friends, either abroad or domestically, sometimes pitied me for living in such a polluted city. But I think that was in the past. Over the past 2 years, really big progress has been made tremendously, especially in terms of this PM 2.5. I think we have a number, it dropped from 78 micrograms to 53. So that's quite a considerable number. And this is just a more visible progress, but also in air, in water, in soil, we also made a big progress. So China's experience, I think we have 4 experiences. I think it's something we can share with our friends. How can we achieve this? How can we make further progress? I think first is the political commitment. Here, the political commitment does not necessarily mean only the government or the public sectors have this commitment, which means all the sectors of life, social society should have this kind of commitment, willingness, awareness to strive for the same goal. So this is kind of a big mobilization and a motivation process for the government and for all the sectors. So we do believe that as long as we all form this kind of political commitment and willingness, so we all fight for in the same direction, definitely we can achieve a lot. So second is a strategic alignment. That's more or less together with the national strategic plans or our strategies. That means how can we incorporate all those goals of the SDG into our national development plans in all these sectors. And the third is the institutional framework. Because China is such a big country, we have more than 1.3, almost 1.4 billion people covering such a large, vast territory. And we have 31 provinces and more than 600 municipal governments and thousands of even lower governments. So how can we mobilize so many people at different areas to do the same thing, have on the same page for the same direction? This is a big challenge for us as well. So we have started from this institutional framework. We can do a lot. I will share you later. And of course, finally, is boosting the participation of all. I think that's the very theme of our seminar today. So as for this political commitment, just as I said, for the whole society, sometimes it's really difficult to keep everybody on the same page, let them identify the same goals. But it needs lots of education, lots of in the public awareness and efforts to do that. And the second is strategic alignment. So we have actually incorporated all these goals, 17 goals and 169 targets of SDG, into our national development plans. And we have split them, incorporate them at the central government level, at the provincial government level, and at the country level, so that every sector, every level of government knows what they do, what they're supposed to do, and what kind of goals they're supposed to achieve within a certain period of time. So that's and furthermore, I think China, our government right now advocates we call a new development theory or new development philosophy. Just kind of 5 words. That is innovation, green, inclusive, open, and shared. I think that's the 5 words. That's the very key words of our development. So we can see that all these words actually are in full compatibility with the very theme of the SDG: the people, peace, and the planet, right? Prosperity and the partnership. So you can see that our domestic strategy are in full line with the SDGs, and these two things could kind of motivate and help with each other. And of course, for these coordinations, we have quite a strong government comparing with some other countries. It is a difference. So, but because we have a vast land, we have different levels of development across all China. So for certain goals, we do need different agencies to do together. So in China, right now, headed by the Foreign Ministry, we have a kind of a coordination mechanism, which is composed of more than 42 different government ministries or agencies and some other semi-government and the non-private sectors to do. So this is kind of a coordination mechanism where we convene together a meeting at a certain time just to check the progress made in each and every area of SDG and how can they be fully in line with the international obligations and our domestic development. So this kind of mechanism are playing a very important role. And also further, we have amended certain domestic laws to in full line with the international standard and requirement, like the family, the health, like disability, like the justice, etc. And finally, it's a promoter of South-South cooperation. That's especially in terms of this international cooperation. We do think that we have two channels. First is North-South cooperation. We firmly believe that this is always the main channel for the international development. But at the same time, South-South cooperation is also play a very important supplementary role because all these developing countries should try to be more self-reliant and to be self-resilient. And for China, our international development cooperation is more or less within the frame of South-South cooperation. Like in the year 2015, when President Xi attended the summit, we announced several initiatives. We set up China Peace and Development Fund in UN. And under this fund, we have already financed more than 16 projects helping developing countries for capacity buildings in the SDG areas. And we also support together with the other UN agencies to use this fund targeting at developing countries for their SDG capacity building. And we also set up a South-South Cooperation Fund, also in UN, etc. So I think that's the main channel for us to show that our international obligations in terms of this SDG international cooperation. And also, we are trying to promote these SDG ideas at other multilateral organizations, like in the year 2016 when China hosted the Hangzhou Summit, where we, for the first time ever in the history of G20, that we listed SDG as the #1 agenda on the agenda of the G20 Summit leaders, and we adopted the Hangzhou Agenda 2030 Action Plan, which is still making progress within this framework. And also, of course, in the last year's BRICS Summit, we also had a special session for the 5 BRICS countries and the other 5 developing countries to specifically focus on SDG issues. And also for the China's Belt and Road Initiative, which some of you might be aware, we put SDG as the key integrated part of this whole strategy. So here are some of these projects or examples which we are implementing under this SDG. One is called this Innovation Demonstration Zone. So you can hear, after 1 year of selection and test, etc., right now we approved 3 cities to be the first priority kind of pioneering testing areas for this called Innovation Demonstration Zones. First is called Taiyuan, second is Guilin, third is Shenzhen. So what's that about? It's simple. These different cities in different areas have different industries, have different problems. So this is kind of a locality-driven problem or question-oriented testing areas. For example, for this city of Taiyuan, which is kind of produced lots of goals, heavily polluted, and with heavy industries there. And these, it made lots of money, of course, over the past decades, but due to the change of the economic structure and also the lowering of these products, so it's in kind of a heavy trouble. not only just pollution, but also the economic restructuring. So we are setting up this demonstration zones to see this kind of heavily industrialized cities, how can they change themselves to be more eco-friendly and economically sustainable. So that's one. Second is called Guilin. Guilin is a famous scenic tourist attraction, but they are also facing lots of heavy, I think, desertification problems. So that's the area they are targeting. The third is called Shenzhen. Shenzhen, I think some of my colleagues might be aware, which is a mega city. I think called maybe number 3 big in China, neighboring Hong Kong. It's more than 20 million residents and have a huge GDP. So they are facing the problem of all these big mega cities are facing in the world. So they are thinking about how to kind of revitalize and restructure. They are not short of money, but they are short of, good environment, good air, and a more friendly living environment for residents. So different cities have different problems. So that's the kind of demonstration. Of course, as for participation of all, as for SDG, we are also try to motivate the whole society to do it. Education programs, we use these new medias because currently very few people are watching TV. I think most of us, especially in China, with one handphone, with one mobile phone in hand, you can almost do everything from payment, from watching TV, everything from news, etc. So we're trying to use the new media to educate, to teach people, to make this information more accessible, right? Okay, so just a few pictures. Participation of all. So education from the youth, from the kids first. So you can see some of the primary school students are interacting with some of this diplomatic corps in Beijing for SDG. And academia will have a Tsinghua University establish this joint agreement with Geneva University for SDG Institute. And here, that's the first commercial jet, according to my knowledge, in the world that have painted the symbol of SDG on this plane. It's a Xiamen airline. It's just to indicate their commitment to SDGs. And this is called a DD. It's kind of a Chinese equivalent of Uber. They have bought Uber, actually. In China, so they are trying to provide accessible service to disabled people. This is part of SDG. This is China Mobile. So this is part of our international cooperation projects, which I mentioned. We are using the fund China contributed to UN. Right now, this fund we're going to last for 10 years, and we are together working with the UN DESA for cooperation to helping our developing country friends to promote this economic growth. And the second is Jintao technology. Jintao is kind of a grass, kind of a plant, which is developed by some Chinese scientists. It has kind of a very magical effect. It can be planted in the soil or area, which it can help to stop the sand from shifting and try to, I think, improve the quality of the sand or some other soils. So after a certain period, I think around 100 days, this kind of soil this cash crops or other grains can be planted in this kind of area. So it's kind of magical, I think, grass. So we are also under this UN fund. We're together with DESA, FAO, are working with many countries, especially in Africa. We have signed cooperation with Zimbabwe, but also at the same time, Ghana, Gambia, Mozambique, many other African countries are having showed lots of interest. So this is the Fiji Prime Minister. We are also doing this with the Fiji. So to conclude, I think for the SDG, it's a great job, and it's really kind of the beautiful dreams for all mankind in the world. So from China's point of view, first of all, we should make our own people improve, lift the poverty first, make our own environment clean and beautiful, because this will also affect our neighbors. But at the same time, as a big developing country, we have this obligation to help others, especially the developing world, to make our own contributions. So we are doing this at both the domestic and the international front So domestically, this year, our central government have these three major battles goals. You can see this battles actually is for everyone. But you can see most of them, or can say all of them, have closely linked with the SDG or Agenda 2030. Firstly is the preventing major risks. Here the risks is actually more or less to do with the financial, currency, economic risks. Second is targeted poverty alleviation. Just as I mentioned, by the year 2020, we have committed to eliminate all the poverty. So that's a big job. And the third is pollution, keep on for the pollution control. And on the international stage, surely we want a better world, more beautiful world. We want peace. We want the mutual respect and the win-win situation, win-win cooperation. So surely we will keep on stick to our commitment for this, for a better world for all. So thank you, colleagues. Sorry.
I'd like to thank the representative of China. And are there any quick questions? It was a bit of a long presentation. No? Then let's move to the next presentation from representative of Spain.
Muchas gracias por darme la palabra. Buenas tardes a todos. Quisiera agradecer al gobierno checo y al gobierno colombiano que nos brinden esta ocasión para intercambiar opiniones y buenas prácticas sobre cómo lograr sociedades inclusivas, sostenibles y resilientes a través de la participación. La Agenda 2030 exige dotarse de una gobernanza.
The Agenda 2030 requires that we have sufficient governance that will ensure inclusive decision-making that will also be participative and representative. Also, the Agenda 2030 requires international cooperation for achieving the goals of sustainable development. Number 17 and 17.7 in particular. In Spain, the Agenda 2030 is not only a political measure for sustainable development, but it's also the state policy for sustainable development. Agenda 2030 contains key words for international policies for common interaction with the public and for the final account keeping and controlling. Spain, at the high-level meeting for 2030, wants to achieve the coordination of our objectives and goals, and we want to check whether these objectives are achieved. Also, this group prepares a national review in which Spain will undergo within the high-level forum within the ECOSOC meeting in July this year. This policy is very important. Various ways were adopted in Spain that support the participation and involvement of citizens. Let me mention at least a couple of them. In Spain, the participation of the public was made possible through their drawing up legislation on the websites of various ministries. Spain includes civic society through civic participation on the reforms of public governance. The objective of these reforms is to give our offices greater effectiveness. We want to learn to use new technologies. We want to improve the involvement of and engagement of people and give them a chance to see that the government is working hard. We are working on an access plan for people with disabilities, the plan of which is that these most vulnerable of groups were involved in the decision-making process. Our strategic plan of equality and opportunity drew up the objective in Spain, that is the economic and political position of the people and involvement of women into public affairs. Participation of citizens is governed by a number of laws, especially in the area of the environment. There's a Spanish observatory for racism, and its objective is to support equality and non-discrimination. Through that, we make sure that marginalized groups get involved as well. Spain thinks that digital technologies offer us an opportunity to support the participation of citizens, and that's why this year we are going to launch an online platform for the management and sharing of information that will concern the implementation of the 2030 agenda. As I've said at the beginning, the Agenda 2030 is a global agenda, which is why it's run within international cooperation, and it requires the inclusion and engagement of everybody. We could, of course, cooperate bilaterally with the EU, but we also cooperate multilaterally on the international forum to achieve better participation. For instance, the Spanish cooperation is supported through the involvement of citizens, which is a key issue in strengthening governance and the rule of law. And at the same time, it also is about strengthening public institutions. These are going to be the priority of the fifth plan of cooperation for years 2018 to 2021. This plan will have one line of events or action that will ensure that citizens will know their legal rights. It will support access to information on the part of the public, and at the same time it will also support information for the public through the civic society. People will have the chance to support the warranties for their human rights. This is sort of a summary of what we've been doing in Spain within Agenda 2030. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to the representative of Spain, and now I will give the floor to the representative of Thailand.
I would like to speak about 2 points here about the inclusion of all sectors of society in the path towards sustainable development. The first of all is that as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, as the main coordinator in the SDG 17, the Partnerships of the Goal, we have established the working group, open-ended working group for sustainable development, which include the CSO representative and the government representative in there. The results of this working group meeting will be submitted to the Committee for Sustainable Development with the Prime Minister of Thailand as the head of the committee. And this way, the opinions of the civil society organizations can be reflected in the national agenda drafting. The second point is that, as you may remember, last year we represented our VNR in HLPF together 42 countries, and in the panel there were the foreign minister of our country together with the representative from the business sector and the youth representative. Thailand believes that VNR drafting process is a process and platform that include all stakeholders in the engagement of sustainable development. So right now and this year we continue to update our own VNR, and although we are not presenting our own VNR in the HLPF 2018, we continue to update it, and we are considering to co-host or host many side events during HLPF 2018 to disseminate the updated VNR for 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Thailand. I now give the floor to the representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, every country is bound to have its own context and circumstances in terms of natural resources, human capital, political setup, and socio-economic realities. Being endowed with relatively abundant resources, labor and land, to be used as growth engine of the economy to eradicate poverty in all its forms, Ethiopia has long remained poor and is one of the least developed countries in the world. Ethiopia is landlocked, multi-ethnic, multilingual, and the second most populous country in Africa next to Nigeria, with 93.4 million people in 2017. The Constitution of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is a manifestation of the covenant made among nationalities and peoples of Ethiopia. It aims at building unified economic society. The Constitution proclaimed a decentralized government administrative system to be able to provide for direct participation by the broader citizenry through devolution of power to the lowest administrative levels in economic, social, and environmental development of the country, as well as the building of the democratic system of the government. On the basis of existing national realities and with constitutional endorsement to build one political and economic space for collective aspiration of common economic and political destiny, the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia has established a federal system of administration with power devolution to the lowest administrative levels, which are very close to grassroots communities. The institutional mechanism has provided opportunities for inclusive participation in the national development, including the 2030 Agenda. Moreover, the overriding development objectives of the Ethiopian government is eradicating poverty in all its forms, and of course, promoting prosperity of its people. Accordingly, all national development policies, strategies, plans, and programs are geared towards this end. In this regard, my delegation wants to highlight the existence of conducive policy approach to advance the 2030 Agenda that foster sustainable, resilient, and inclusive societies at the national and subnational levels in Ethiopia. In a nutshell, taking into account of integration of SDGs into the national plan for its effective implementation, nothing has costed Ethiopia in terms of looking for new policy approach. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, for Ethiopia, the need for coherent, integrated, participatory approach to sustainable development is not an option. It is mandatory by the supreme law of the land. Accordingly, Ethiopia is used to have one national development plan and one budget, which are prepared through inclusive participation of stakeholders at the federal and regional levels. In this regard, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has been integrated into the National Development Plan, which we call it Growth and Transformation Plan, so as to effectively deliver on economic, social, and environmental transformation in the national context. Inclusive institutional framework, strong political commitment, and transformative leadership of the government, as well as strong national ownership and robust national development coordination are main instruments for coherent, integrated, and participatory approach to sustainable development in Ethiopia. These instruments are fundamental to address issues of climate change, disaster risk reduction, and the new urban agenda, and domestic, as well as external resource mobilization to finance sustainable development in the Ethiopian context. The Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development during the UN Member State meeting held in New York during 25-27 September 2015. Subsequently, by establishing the necessary groundwork, Ethiopia conducted well-coordinated national consultations with all stakeholders from diverse community, including government structure, the private sector, the civil society organization, the academia, professional associations, farmers and pastoralist associations, women associations, youth associations, and association of the disabled, and the parliamentarian, the opposition political parties, and development partners on the 2030 Agenda integrated into the second National Growth and Transformation Plan. Integrated into this plan, Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development has been approved by the Council of Ministers, followed by ratification of the House of People Representatives, and has been under implementation since 2015-16. The National Planning Commission of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, which is directly accountable to the Prime Minister, is responsible for the preparation of the National Development Plan and monitoring and reviewing the implementation progress, spearheaded, and the overall national coordination. As an integrated part of GTP2, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is in its third year of implementation under Ethiopian context. Last year, Ethiopia conducted the 2017 Voluntary National Review of SDGs with inclusive engagement and consultation of stakeholders across the country, naming its report as Government Commitments, National Ownership, and Performance Trends. Ethiopia has taken the voluntary national review process as an excellent opportunity to further deepen the national ownership of the SDGs through enhanced engagement and broad consultation of stakeholders across the country, assess the national progress made in implementation of SDGs, and identify challenges in accelerating national efforts towards effective implementation of SDGs. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, climate change is indeed happening, and it is undermining the development gains of vulnerable countries like Ethiopia. In this regard, the timely and full implementation of Paris Agreement is not an option, but is necessary. To this effect, my delegation would like to underline Ethiopia's continued commitment to play its part in the global effort of addressing issues of climate change. Nationally, Ethiopia has got ratified the Paris Agreement on climate change by the Parliament and is implementing climate resilient green economy strategy as an integral part of the Growth and Transformation Plan by undertaking massive reforestation through community mobilization and clean energy production from renewable sources through massive public investment, with ultimate objective of reducing disaster risk and potential damage through national comprehensive and coordinated disaster risk management system in the context of sustainable development. The National Disaster Risk Management Policy and Strategy is also under implementation as an integral part of GTP2. Accordingly, in coordination with broad citizenry and the international community, the government of Ethiopia has been able to effectively manage the 2015-16 worst drought ever seen in the last 50 years in Ethiopia without inflicting human deaths across the country. The most prominent challenges encountering Ethiopia in the implementation process of SDGs include climate change-induced drought and declining market prices of major Ethiopia's exporting commodities in the international market. Addressing these challenges requires more integrated and coordinated national efforts and effective global partnership. However, from early implementation progress of SDGs and the good track record that Ethiopia government had from MDGs, Ethiopia is going well in achieving SDGs. Finally, it is very clear that there are challenges in reaching national sustainable development goals, aspirations, but also opportunities. Ethiopia believes that acting together, it is possible to overcome challenges and maximize opportunities to realize the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the representative of Ethiopia. I have 9 requests for the floor, so to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak, can I ask that we have the statements more concise? And if you have very long statements, we are happy to upload them to the website so that there's a record of them. The next speaker is the representative of Estonia.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I will not have a very long statement, but I want to react, first of all, what I heard today, the importance of participation and the importance of especially to get involved in a decision-making process is the private sector. And to put in a positive way communication between private sector and civil society. So I want to stress the importance of implementation of SDG 12, the sustainable consumption and production, which has very strong implication to most of the SDGs implementation, and it also helps us to create good collaborative and solution-oriented platforms where the private sector and civil society and consumers and producers can easily relate with. So it is one of the examples of SDGs and uniqueness that the consumers can easily give the signals to the producers, and with the change of consumption patterns and production patterns, we can easily move towards the goals which have set in the Agenda 2030. What one good example I want to stress out on the participation and related with the SDP is the World Cleanup Day this year, 15th of September. It's originally established format in Estonia, but fortunately this year, 15th of September, 150 countries globally have a one day where the green wave starts from New Zealand and ends up in Hawaii, and millions and millions of citizens have a chance to give their input to clean the world. In relation of the implementation of SDGs, to stress that the importance of equally and balanced way of development and implementation of social, economic and environmental policies. All 3 pillars are important, and therefore the unique opportunity here to stress that global highest level environmental policy development and decision-making body, United Nations Environmental Assembly. Last session dealt with the problem of tackling pollution, and the next session next year has announced that the theme will be innovative solution for environmental challenges and sustainable consumption and production. So therefore there is a huge opportunity for global member states to keep this momentum, to foster the steps towards implementation and towards the very challenging targets which have set in Agenda 2030, and to live with a positive, to finish with a positive message that to also to let the voice of global environmental ministers sound in a high-level political forum this year, to get this, to create this huge momentum and to unify what are our challenges and what are our opportunities, so no one should not be left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would like to thank also host country and the organizers for the opportunity to participate in such an important event here. With the aim of timely and effectively achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and implementation of post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda, Azerbaijan continues to successfully implement its sustainable development strategy according to the strategic roadmaps. All our development plans and programs, both ongoing and those yet to be formulated during the period until 2030, will be revised, harmonized, and aligned to support achievement of nationalized SDGs. While the government will be pursuing ambitious structural reforms program in coming years, it considers SDGs as a comprehensive framework providing integrated approach for development, complementing and reinforcing the strategic roadmaps. Leaving no one behind principle fully coincides with the priorities of the government to address issues of balanced spatial territorial development and reducing inequalities, eliminating all forms of poverty and empowerment of women and youth. This particularly refers to IDPs. The government, while acting as a coordinator for the attainment of nationalized SDGs, is ready to facilitate and support SDG-focused initiatives of civil society, institutions, academia, business and professional associations, other stakeholders and partners. Local mass media in civil society would be engaged as brokers for these online and offline processes, securing outreach to all the groups and segments of society. Special emphasis would be made to hear voice of women, youth, of the disadvantages and particularly of IDPs. Taking into consideration the necessity of complex approach to implementation of SDGs from the institutional and political point of view, and in order to streamline the relevant actions to coordinate activities related to the commitments deriving from 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development among all stakeholders, the National Coordination Council for Sustainable Development with its secretariat in the Ministry of Economy was established according to the presidential decree. The National Coordination Council has full authority to perform its core functions, such as ensure broad-based and inclusive stakeholder participation, translate global sustainable development goals, targets and indicators to the national context, identify national priorities and sustainable development gaps, articulate inclusive and rights-based national strategies and policies, coordinate and promote collaboration among various government agencies and ministers, secure coherence among development partners to align with national priorities, design national reporting and review framework and links to regional and global reviews, identify needs and opportunities for capacity building. To support the National Coordination Council in both nationalization of the SDGs and further implementation of respective programs and plans, the government established 4 thematic working groups: economic growth and decent jobs, social development, environmental issues, monitoring and evaluation. The Council has the power to establish additional TWGs and engage both local and international expertise to support SDG nationalization, planning and implementation of respective policy measures. The State Statistical Committee is identified as a key national agency responsible for establishment and maintaining effective and responsive monitoring and evaluation system to measure the progress in achievement of nationalized SDGs. The extensive consultations are still in progress for the alignment of SDG goals, targets, and indicators to national priorities. As a result of the work done by National Coordination Council, initial draft priority list of goals, targets, and relevant indicators of SDGs was prepared based on the principle leaving no one behind. A number of educational events on various topics about the role of scientific society, education, civil society, parliament, innovations, gender issues, and private sector in implementation of SDGs was held with organizational support by the National Coordination Council and the United Nations Country Office for Azerbaijan. At the high-level political forum organized by the ECOSOC in New York on 10th and 19th July 2017, the delegation of Azerbaijan headed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Chairman of the National Coordination Council presented first voluntary national review of Azerbaijan on implementation of the SDGs in the country, sharing its experience gained and future plans. With the aim to ensure effective implementation of SDGs and their regional coordination, Azerbaijan prepares to hold in Baku on 6 and 7 September 2018 Baku Forum on Sustainable Development to gather officials responsible for coordination of implementation of SDGs at the national level, as well as United Nations representatives, international and local experts. Using this opportunity, I'd like to invite you to this event to share your experiences related to SDGs and to familiarize yourself with our national approach to this process. It should be also underlined that last February, Deputy Prime Minister Ali Ahmedov of the Republic of Azerbaijan and Chairman of the National Coordination Council addressed an official letter to the President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, Ms. Maria Shatardova, with the request to include the Republic of Azerbaijan in the list of countries to present next voluntary national review at the high-level political forum to be held in 2019. We hope to have a chance to present the progress made by Azerbaijan after our first report at the next forum. Last but not least, Azerbaijan also contributes to the implementation of SDGs internationally. The 6th Global Baku Forum, held on 15-16 March 2018, gathered together many incumbent and former heads of states and governments from all over the world, provided a useful platform for discussions on contemporary challenges in creation of inclusive societies. United Nations Secretary General His Excellency Antonio Guterres, in his letter to the participants of the forum, dedicated to the theme Bridging Gaps to Create Inclusive Societies, states that Nizami Ganjavi International Center, as the organizer of the forum, creates bridges among societies and cultures at this difficult time, serving to the establishment of an inclusive society, which is one of the very important United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, can I appeal to you to please make short statements? I understand if you have long prepared statements. I promise we will upload them on the website so we will have a record for the meeting. But I have 9 speakers on my list and we have half an hour left. And I would like to give everyone an opportunity to at least say a few words. So I please appeal to you in the interest of collegiality with everyone here who was asked to speak. So I now give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
Thank you, Mrs. Moderator. Actually, I understand that it's an open presentation of participatory projects and discussion, not of participants, so we can speak of projects. Because I want to reflect on the notion that was said today from the floor, and it's about the inclusive of everybody, including the business community. And here, since we are showcasing positive practices and policy, I would like to underline that, and as the presidency of the G77 and China, we need to understand that we have a problem in financing development. We heard Mr. Lajczak this morning speaking of $5 to $7 trillion, yet it's not sufficient. So if we understand this, and if we understand that from the voice of the South, the indebtedness of the countries is very high to fulfill the 2030 agenda, and if we want to continue on this path, it's going to be more expensive because the credit rating of these countries is getting worse whenever you are over-indebted compared to your GDP. Having said so, we have developed the model of public-private partnership, whereby we find that this is the best practice in order to continue financing development without burdening or overburdening your budgets for the governments. So yes, inclusive we have to be. We cannot do it as governments alone. We have to include the private sector. At the same time, our case that I want to show here is the renewable energy case of Egypt. We have had the project of the Benban solar park. This is the largest planned solar installation in the world. It covers 1.6 gigawatt, over 37 square kilometers of solar panels. And the idea is we've given it through the feed-in tariffs to the private sector. We think that this way we can finance our development, we can cover for the gap that we are living without having to put the pressure on the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the representative of Egypt. I now give the floor to the representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since this is for the first time I'm taking the floor, I would like to express our appreciation to the organizers for an excellent job, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, to the appropriate UN agency, and it is especially a great honor for me to welcome you, Her Excellency, Ms. Catherine Pollard, here. I will try to be as short as possible. In Armenia, development cooperation continues to play a transformative role in a wide range of areas involving multiple stakeholders and capitalizing on innovative projects to co-create development solutions. Our track record gives confidence to continue on the path of innovation, exploring further spaces for experimentation. The most recent and notable example being very first summit on impact investment for development hosted in Armenia several months ago, held in partnership with the UN Development Programme and the UNCEAD's Social Impact Initiative. At this summit, for the first time, the UNDP not only looked into the potential of leveraging social enterprise and impact business to achieve the SDGs, but also delivered an important message that the UN development system is actually open for doing business in a new way towards more innovative investment models for the investing world. Together with our partners, we have offered our support to a follow-up on this process and to take it forward. Several months ago, Armenia held a thematic panel on the margins of the high-level Participatory Forum to brief the UN community in New York on the outcomes of the Impact Investment Summit held in Yerevan and elaborate on the approaches to leverage impact investment and social enterprise to achieve the SDGs. We are very encouraged by the interest the process has generated, and we are keen to share our experience and encourage further discussions on co-creating, accelerating and scaling up development solutions for better economic opportunity and growth. Madam Chair, development cooperation for 2030 agenda has been a useful framework to evaluate past efforts and to understand the ways of improving the efficiency of development partnership. Having embarked on the process of nationalization of the 2030 agenda, we are presently setting up institutional frameworks to secure compatibility of Armenia's national priorities and strategies with the SDGs. This is complemented by an ambitious reform agenda and the launch of the first national SDG Innovation Lab, which is set to operate as a partnership between the Prime Minister's Office and the UN country team to accelerate SDGs with a focus on the strong impact of innovation in advancing smart development. We appreciate the UN's continuous support to the process of nationalization and mainstreaming of SDGs in Armenia. As demonstrated by the recent visit of the SDGs Mainstreaming Acceleration and Policy Support Mission of the UNDP to Yerevan, the National SDG Innovation Lab in Armenia will have a central role in implementing the recommendations of the MAPS mission. Thank you, and I beg your pardon for interpreters for being so quick. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Armenia, and I give the floor to the representative of Morocco.
Merci. Donc, je souhaite également.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'd like to thank the organizers for opening this session, and also like to thank the Czech Republic and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic for making this possible. I'd like to briefly share with you what we do for the implementation of the 2030 agenda in Morocco. As we all know, in 2017, we adopted a strategy, a national strategy for sustainable development. We adopted it on the 26th of June last year. It is a strategy that we will be using for all our for our stakeholders involved in the process. It is a strategy within the framework of which we define 7 key points. These 7 key points concern various areas. Let's start with the first one, that is sustainable development management. The second one concerns the environment. The third one concerns natural resources and their valorization. The fourth one is putting into practice the national policy. The fifth one concerns sensitive matters of our environment that concern the surface. The next one is equality between the individual strata of society, and we try to cooperate with all the stakeholders. We try to ensure for them that we can cooperate as good as possible. We have 169 areas in which we'd like to cooperate in Morocco. We've got also the opportunity to act in a way so that we could achieve an acceptable level of achievement by 2030. We'd like to evaluate and put into numbers the impacts of the policies that we have adopted. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the representative of Morocco, and I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to start by thanking you for giving me the floor, and I will keep it as short as possible. Actually, my presentation or my statement will focus on the participative approach that the government of Lebanon is adopting to ensure full implementation of the Agenda 2030. The Lebanese government established a national committee, interministerial committee, to ensure the implementation of the Agenda 2030. I will not go in depth in details about the laws that we have adopted on the reform, administrative reform, ensuring the participation of women, or anti-corruption, but I would like to highlight what we consider in Lebanon as a positive approach, which is the inclusion of private sector. In August 2017, Parliament ratified the Public-Private Partnership Law. And why is this important? Because it's a preparation for the upcoming session or the upcoming conference in Paris. And the conference is called CEDR. And the organization of this conference on April 6 in Paris aimed at bolstering the country's economy and infrastructure, where the Lebanese government will present its capital investment plan. A major part of the investment program's project could and would be implemented through public-private partnership. In conclusion, Madam President, we will present in July our voluntary national review, and I'm sure you will hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank the representative of Lebanon, and I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you. Turkey has made significant progress in achieving MDGs between 2000 and 2015, particularly on reducing poverty, increasing the quality of education, addressing inequalities, reducing maternal and infant mortality rates, increasing environmental sustainability and access to basic services. Turkey's national development model is human-centered and focuses on economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection. Our efforts on empowerment of women focus on removing economic, social, and cultural boundaries and further integrating them into development process, workforce, and decision-making mechanisms. Specific policies and programs have been implemented to ensure the well-being and fulfillment of the potential of children and youth. Elderly and disabled persons receive special attention in our development process as well. We presented our voluntary national review during the first high-level political forum in 2016. Turkey aims at realizing SDGs in line with its national policies. In this regard, the Ministry of Development, as the national focal point on sustainable development, develops policies and guides the implementation on this issue. Since then, the Turkish government conducted a comprehensive stock-taking project in consultation with relevant stakeholders in order to identify the current state of affairs with regard to the implementation of the SDGs in Turkey. National policies, programs, and projects were analyzing with SDG glasses. National development plans, annual programs, sectoral and thematic strategies and action plans, strategic plans and programs and projects were evaluated in terms of 17 SDGs. This analysis provided a unique opportunity to integrate and mainstream SDGs for our main national policy documents. The project also compared the achievements of Turkey with those of OECD, G20, and EU countries. The project helps to identify gaps relating to legal and institutional frameworks. Furthermore, the National Sustainable Commission will be reorganized with a robust stakeholder engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, Turkey is currently in preparation of its 11th National Development Plan. As the coordinator of the plan, the Ministry of Development ensures stakeholders' involvement in the process, in line with no one is left behind principle. Ad hoc committees are established in process of preparation of National Development Plan. A wide range of stakeholders participating in these committees evaluate current situations and recommend policies for upcoming National Development Plan. These committees refer to SDGs and related national studies for their own policy recommendations. These concrete steps for nationalizing SDGs will be followed by integration of SDGs into other sectoral strategies and action plans. Turkey believes that the SDGs cannot be achieved without strengthened global partnership for mobilizing the means of implementation. As such, during the G20 Turkish presidency in 2015, our priority was inclusiveness, in implementation, and investment for robust growth. Efforts to achieve SDGs will require a massive amount of financial resources. It is essential to diversify financial instruments and direct them towards sustainable development priorities. Therefore, the role of private sector should also be increased to achieve SDGs. Turkey and UNDP established the Istanbul International Center for Private Sector in Development as a global UNDP center in 2013 to contribute to this objective. Official development has a critical role in achieving SDGs, especially in least developed countries. International development cooperation is an integral part of Turkey's foreign policy. Our official development assistance in 2016 amounted to $6.5 billion. This amount corresponds to 0.78% of our gross national income. Thus, we exceeded UN target of 0.7%. We continue to expand the geographical scope of our development cooperation beyond the Balkans, the Caucasus, and Central Asia to countries in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, and Pacific. As an emerging development partner for the least developed countries, Turkey is actively contributing to the efforts for finding solutions to the pressing problems of the LDCs. Since 2011, Turkey has exceeded its commitment to provide $200 million to LDCs, marking $1.5 billion assistance, which corresponds to $300 million annually. Turkey will also host the UN Technology Bank in Gebze as part of its policy to support the LDCs. Through the bank, LDCs will acquire capacity to transfer technologies. We made a commitment to provide $2 million annual voluntary contribution for the next 5 years for the Technology Bank. Full operational of the Technology Bank by the end of 2017 has made SDG achieved 17.8 as a target. The bank will be financed by voluntary contributions. Therefore, it is important for all concerned to contribute to the efforts of the UN and Turkey towards resource mobilization. Turkey will maintain its important mission to accomplish global sustainable development goals for offering its experience and knowledge on sustainable development through bilateral and multilateral cooperation and aid programs to the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to the representative of Turkey, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the government of the Czech Republic for hosting this ECOSOC Preparatory Meeting and congratulate the Czech Republic for its presidency of ECOSOC. The Philippines committed to the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals. We strongly recognize the achievement of the SDGs lies on the principle of leaving no one behind and inclusive participation of all, and not to fall into the sin of indifference, as quoted by Madam Chair, as spoken by the Pope. We highlight that the Philippines additionally has strong engagements with all stakeholders in its development of laws and policies. We have done extensive consultations with all sectors of society and all levels of government, including the local government units, to formulate the Philippine vision for sustainable development. The Philippines has also conducted consultations and information, which has tapped radio guesting and attendance to special events to reach the public and disseminate the 2030 Agenda. We have also received categorical support from the legislative branch in implementation of the SDGs. They have created an oversight body of parliament by attaining the SDGs. There is also a strong interface with academia so that policymakers and think tanks work with our legislative branch to determine how to address the challenges of the 2030 agenda. We are also using e-governance and transparency initiatives. The Philippines looks forward to working closely also with the Czech Republic and its team on especially on issues of particular importance for the Philippines, such as poverty eradication, climate change, migration, financing for development, illicit financial flows and stolen assets, international trade, overseas development assistance, South-South cooperation, peace and security. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to the representative of the Philippines, and I now give the floor to the representative of Uganda.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd also like to thank the government of the Czech government for giving us the warm hospitality since we arrived here and for organizing such a wonderful meeting. Madam Chair, due to time, I'll cut straight to the chase. I'll try to be brief. I want to share a little bit of experience right now as far as SDGs are concerned. Uganda is has in its process a Vision 2040, of which intent is to transform the country from a predominantly peasant country to a modern and prosperous country by 2040. The Agenda 2030 has been integrated into our 5-year National Development Plan. Right now, we're in our second National Development Plan, that's 2015-16 to 2019-20. And we had a highly consultative, interactive, and process covering a wide stakeholder base. That includes academia, development partners, civil society, private sector, mention everything. It's also interesting that we look at our legal framework. For example, our constitution, it's as if the framers of this constitution already were aware about these goals, only that in our modern era now we're talking about SDGs, because if you look at our own constitution, for example, there is it spells out rights for all citizens to peace and democracy, recognition of role of women, economic empowerment, a need for balanced and equitable development, which is what we are trying to address today. Basically, by adhering to our constitution, we are directly contributing to the SDG 16 and others. We have also in the due course enacted other frameworks that include the Public Finance Act. This basically requires accounting officers who are responsible for implementing government programs to be self-accountable on the resources expended on their great priorities. We have also tried to make sure we don't leave other people behind, like introducing Higher Education Student Financing Act that enables students joining our institutions to be able to be given some support to be able to complete their studies. Same applies to the Domestic Violence Act, Registration of Persons Act, that requires legal providing of identification and registration of birth and death. We're also right now running what we call the District Public Service Administration. What does it mean? Decision making is now the decision making is down to the lower levels. It means the people at the lowest level have a say in prioritizing what they want, and so doing you're promoting transparency, accountability, and equitable use of the resources. On poverty and inequality, we have had some significant progress. However, we realize that there are still vulnerabilities in the due course. And what are we doing here for? Being that we run a decentralized system of government that's in districts, local governments, we realize that as time goes on, some districts are developing at a much higher rate than the others. So government has introduced what they call equalization grants, basically try and get more money and give these others which are not performing well due to different factors to see that they can have a wider fiscal space to address some of those pressing service delivery gaps. On gender equality and empowerment, we've tried to make sure that we take care of the gender mainstreaming. For example, the women are given protected seats. They have elective positions. We have about 117 districts, and women have women representatives from all these districts. In addition, it also allowed, in addition to those practices, they're allowed to compete favorably with men. meaning actually as of now we have about, I think, 35 to 40% of our parliament having women, which is really very something of a great achievement. Then for the girl child, what more have we done? We've looked at, as students join the universities, that's the tertiary institutions, they also provided a 1.5 advantage of, to just create this empowerment to enable them increase in the numbers. As I speak now, of course, it has served. I think it has really worked enough, and we're looking at reviewing it with time in the future. On youth, we realize that youth are the majority of our population, but face numerous challenges and multidimensional problems, including inadequate employable skills, limited access to assets and other means of production, and limited access to basic health care. So the government has introduced a youth livelihood program targeting poor and unemployed youth in all districts. The funds advanced with youth are like a revolving fund and help them to have startups, which startups directly improve their living, reducing on poverty, making sure everybody is not left behind, the inclusive SDG 16. We also realize that there is a section of people who are disabled, PWDs. And in our case, actually, the sex differentials in Uganda, disability is higher among women compared to men. And government has still put in place what we've called community-based rehabilitation for equalization to facilitate rehabilitation of and inclusion of PWs in their communities. They're given a special fund to knowing that they have challenges. Then our elderly, what have we done? We've also introduced what we have called social assistance grant for the empowerment to the elderly, who unfortunately have not benefited from any pension scheme, because some of these have never been in formal employment. Those who have been in formal employment are well taken care of by their schemes of pension. The private sector, we have mentioned about it, many speakers have mentioned about it, we have not left it behind. What we've done is that in building these new partnerships, you bring upon the private sector under the PPPs, that's public-private sector partnerships, which we have also enacted as our law, and they will come in with as they come in with their interest to make sure that their first goal is professionalization. In others, they don't know that contributing to the SDGs, like something that's very interesting that we have, that we sometimes forget, as somebody mentioned earlier, in how in the morning of what we can do about SDGs is that, each other of your life, you're contributing to SDGs. You may not know, unfortunately. So it's something that we have to do more to make people realize that in everything you do, you touch, you're contributing to SDGs. Development partners are also playing a key role by providing us some technical financial capacity building. And last but not least, we realize that Uganda has not laid back in regional and continental and international levels agenda. We are trying to combat terrorism within our region. That's in, thank you. In Somalia, we've sent their forces to make sure they can do what they can. Then we realize that implementing of these SDGs, we will need funds, we will need money on top of what you get from development, but you need to have a resource base, resource mobilization. What is our strategy here? We're thinking it's important to make sure we invest largely also in our 5 key areas. That's agriculture, the backbone of our economy, tourism, which contributes 9% of our GDP. The oil that was discovered, we make sure we put a lot of emphasis there. Infrastructure development, we want to make sure we have electricity production from 825 megawatts to 2,500. It's clear that all countries that have developed, electricity has been a major factor in their development. We're also looking at standard gauge radar, which will run across, actually it's from the whole of East African region, but the dream is to have it across Africa. And lastly, human capital development, where we are giving access to universal primary education, universal secondary education, and of course the higher tertiary grant that I mentioned earlier. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank you to the representative of Uganda, and I now give the floor to the United Nations Economic Commission for Asia Pacific.
Thank you so much, Catherine, our moderator. Excellent moderation, given the challenges going on. I wanted to move away from very specific things we have discussed this morning, New York, perspective on public participation or participation and the voices, and then we heard various examples of very specific best practices. I think what we have as yet not discussed, and I know Neil is going to take home some of these messages, so I wanted to add few perspectives, that I think it's important that stakeholder engagement and public participation be understood a bit more emphatically from a pragmatic and a practical point of view. I think these two things are intrinsically linked to effective governance and development outcomes, no doubt. And of course, they're also central to building sustainable and resilient societies, a subject that we are going to be discussing at HLPF. And also it underpins conflict prevention and mitigation and peace building, which is a pretty daunting task at hand. What is critical is that we need to get some upfront investments in defining approach and modality, as well as policy, legal and institutional architecture and processes to engage stakeholders in a way that improves efficiency and also the impact of policy measures. Now, this is not going to be that easy, it's pretty complex. I just wanted to share with colleagues out here that given the phenomenal size of the problem and the task at hand, I think when we are deliberating Sustainable Development Agenda, one of the modalities that our regional commissions has picked up on is to move away from generalities, but to engage member states in a way that they can prioritize what they'd like to talk about in terms of public participation. And I think we're very fortunate that our member states have agreed on a regional roadmap for implementation of 2030 agenda. It of course underscores upfront effective governance, which is, as I have mentioned, very critical for enhancing participation of interested parties. So in context of this year's thematic debate at HLPF, our regional commission has launched broader participation, which is of course fundamental to transformation to resilient societies. But a prerequisite for this in the societal consultations that we are undertaking is to understand the diverse and interconnected risk that the region faces, and this has been talked about this morning, the rapid demographic change, but also rural-urban transition, increased demand for natural resources and pollution, and of course how all this combined has an disproportionate impacts on marginalized groups and communities. So how do we position them in an effective manner? Now, the key point that I'd like to make at the end is the challenges that stakeholder engagement and consultation can be quite a diffused or an abstract concept in some senses. So it's important we bring clarity to the discussion and operationalize some of the conceptual frameworks. So we have also brought stakeholders together to develop what I call the indicators of effective engagement. These focus on, one, upfront defining the clarity of purpose for engagement, which then shapes, of course, the methodology and the policy frameworks. Second, as of course this has been talked about, inclusion, which is at the heart of the engagement, to ensure that diversified voices are heard, and even those most marginalized get heard in the engagement. The third is transformation. So stakeholders have to be brought in not just to talk about issues at hand, but to look at solutions and with clear upfront definition, identification of the objective of this engagement to bring in supportive changes to the areas. And finally, the proactiveness with which the stakeholders need to be engaged, and the frequency and regularity of engagement is important. There are, of course, a lot of barriers to engagement, and I think we need to bring out these barriers to engagement and public participation. Under this, of course, systemic, by which I mean trust, institutional mandates, and the lack of effective media or the absence of the public spaces, which is important for engagement. There is, of course, a lot of other things, but I think I have really talked about some of the examples within the Asian continents. There are several more best practices, and now that this session has taken place, raised a lot of awareness, we hopefully will be able to develop a repository and account of the best practices, but also have some kind of judgment call on whether these best practices are effective in terms of the development accountability and impact. I say this because we have heard about so many things, but we have recognized that scalability is a big issue. And I think with these schemes, we need to think out of the box on how to bring them to scale. So I'll stop here.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to the representative of UNEP.
Almost good evening, colleagues. As you may well know, United Nations Environment Programme is a leading environmental authority based in the capital city of the Republic of Kenya, Nairobi, that sets the global environmental agenda, promotes the coherent implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development within the UN system, and serve as an authoritative advocate for the global environment. As such, United Nations Environment Programme traditionally works closely with the major groups as integral part of sustainable development agenda. And engaging the major groups and stakeholders is a part of we considered good and efficient governance, along with the building effective legal frameworks and institutions. I was in the morning already speaking about the involvement of major groups and stakeholders in decision-making processes under the United Nations Environment Programme and its governing body. I didn't want to repeat it, but everybody is now understanding it's not only about the environment, but also in the linkages with the economic, social, and sometimes a fourth pillar, political pillar, if you want to say it like this. I want to stop a little bit concerning the cooperation with the private sector. Private sector or business community, public and private, they are integral part of the major groups and stakeholders as recognized part to the UN system. That's why the UN Environment Programme strengthens its cooperation currently with the private sector. We created autonomous or strength private sector unit that is systematically now working with the private sector while strengthening also the risk assessment of working with them. And really the work with the major group and stakeholders also should show the opportunities and benefits of such a cooperation, but at the same time to highlight the risk if the cooperation will not be efficient. And for private or public and private business community, the UN Environment Programme, also with other partners, is offering broad spectrum of cooperation on the concept of green growth that was initiated by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2007. Green economic concept we established in 2008, European Union circular economy. And our Egyptian friend also, he mentioned this renewable energy or resource efficiency, sustainable consumption and production, energy savings and so on. These are providing opportunities for business community, but also for citizens as a consumers and participants in these things. I already mentioned also these Bali voluntary guidelines on a national legislation on access to information, public participation, and access to justice and decision-making. I don't want to repeat it, but what I want to say is that now we should really go beyond only, as our colleague from ESCAP said, going from generalities really to more practical things, and to go also beyond, for example, this general governance affairs things, really to defend the human rights, practical, economic, social, and so on human rights, and including the environmental one. What I wanted also to mention, it was not mentioned here, in also intervention of the member states, it's mentioned climate change in particular. But as you know, we have a broad spectrum also of multilateral environmental agreements, and UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, as an authoritative advocate for environment, fully recognized independent international legal entity of multilateral environmental agreements, but is assisting them also in aligning their goals, internationally agreed global environmental goals, with SDGs. And some of these multilateral environmental agreements, they have a goals even beyond 2030, and I appeal to member states to remember this, some of them. They have even 2050 Convention on Biological Diversity. And now this is necessary to seek alignment and also to see if these multilateral environmental agreements will be aligning completely with 2030 and will be more ambitious, okay, thinking in a longer term. That's why I am mentioning, for example, is now starting, and it will start it with Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2018. It will be the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, and it will start officially negotiations and preparation for post-2020 biodiversity strategic framework that should revise also Aichi biodiversity targets. Also started process on working on post-2020 strategic framework for chemicals and hazardous waste management under the strategic approach to international management of chemicals. And these processes should really fit together also at the national level when speaking about SDGs. And we are all the time, United Nations Environment Programme, trying to appeal to everybody to think in integrated way, okay? In integrated way, if we are speaking about the nationally determined contributions under UNFCCC, you should be thinking at the same time about Aichi biodiversity target, also about the voluntary target setting under UNCCD Convention to Combat Desertification. The last one, I want to say, we should also think about this SDGs, Agenda 2030, with the efforts of the United Nations Secretary General also to reform development agenda. These devolution, decentralization, and more regionalization. And this is also a challenge for national level devolution to the local community, to the ordinary citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now the last speaker on my list is a representative of OECD.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm last, I'll be very brief. I'd like to thank and welcome the leadership and hospitality of the Czech Republic today. We were very privileged at the OECD to have a visit of Ambassador Chatardova at our special meeting of the OECD Council on the SDGs just a couple of weeks ago. It was a special meeting because we had many partner countries of the OECD there, and as you know, we work with over 100 countries. And one message was very clear from this discussion. Many, if not most, of our governments are struggling with the same issues. They're struggling to get the arms and legs working together and moving in the right direction to have a coherent implementation of the 2030 agenda. This isn't a developed versus developing country thing. On the contrary, I think this is a universal and shared challenge. But going beyond that, if you think that coordinating ourselves is hard enough, one of the other lessons that came out of this discussion is that going out there, listening, ensuring participation, and doing it in a multi-stakeholder manner is even harder, and many of our governments are struggling with this too. In just a couple of months, President Macron of France will convene the OECD's ministerial at our headquarters in Paris, and he's chosen a very ambitious theme. In French, La Refoundation du Multilateralisme, the Refoundation of Multilateralism. And I think that the theme of today's meeting here in Prague captures a bit of what's needed. It's about building a multilateralism that's really people-focused, that's responsive, that gets us really delivering the big agreements of 2015, and that delivers them for everyone. And so as our UNEP colleague was saying, we need to move beyond the generalities and get to the specifics. I'll give just a couple of quick examples of what we're doing at the OECD. We're doing some work with centres of government to better understand how governments are gearing up to implement the SDGs. The Czech Republic is one of several pilot countries that are participating in this, and we'd be very happy to work with any interested country as we grow this network to share experiences. We've just launched a new initiative on subnational implementation of the SDGs, helping cities and provinces and subnational government share experiences and develop good practices in this area. I was pleased to hear our Estonian colleague this morning mention the OECD's work on regulatory policy. And it's true that one of the things we do when we go and look at countries is ask, well, how participatory are you in the development of regulatory policy and regulations? Estonia, of course, faring quite well in this area. And I think more broadly, all of this is part of a big package of work that we're doing under the umbrella of inclusive growth. It's about understanding for us the drivers of inclusion and exclusion in our economies and societies. And there are some very, very specific initiatives. Things like SIGI, the Social Institutions Gender Index, where we're working with something like 160 countries to actually put hard evidence on the table on the social norms that help or hinder the participation of women and girls in everyday social, economic and political processes. So I've just given a very short flavour of what we're doing. Congratulations again to the Czech presidency. And in all of this, rest assured that the OECD continues to work with and for the United Nations in the support to this agenda. Thank you.
Thank the representative of OECD and to thank all the speakers who spoke this afternoon. Your contributions have enriched the discussions we've had today. I'll just turn the mic over to Mr. Neil Priere, who will give us a summary of today and some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Before I get to the few highlights of summary and the closing remarks, I was asked to make a few important announcements. Immediately following this session, there will be a reception, and I'm sure you will all agree with me that our Czech government has been the perfect hosts, and so we wouldn't want to keep them waiting to welcome us for the reception. Therefore, I will make my comments short. The reception will be at the far end of this hallway, to my right, through that door, one floor above where we are sitting right now. The second announcement really concerns the field trip tomorrow to Kolín. The bus will leave promptly at 9 a.m. outside this building, outside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Everyone is asked to be there in time for a 9 o'clock departure. We must leave promptly at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I thank you very much for your cooperation. It is impossible, if not risky, to sum up a rich discussion that took place today from start to finish. And as you could see, we ran out of time. But let me highlight just a few things. This morning we heard from our high-level panel the importance of partnerships in supporting implementation of the SDGs. Several related themes also resonated since the high-level panel discussion. From that and also later on the day today. The first one I would like to also highlight is that participation of all in sustainable development is not an option. It's a necessity. We also heard that equal participation in public and political affairs is also a right. Engaging youths, women, and other groups is both a necessity and an imperative. And so this was an important point of emphasis in all of today's discussion. Promoting participation and inclusion must be bolstered by substantive long-term and systematic measures, including appropriate laws, policies, institutional capacity, and data. Data came through all of the presentations today, the importance of data. We heard too that many stakeholders are actively engaged in working to better their communities. And this afternoon we had two very important panels who struck the notes on that score. These stakeholders must be given dedicated platforms for their important inputs. And then we heard as well that strengthening partnerships and awareness of the SDGs will require improving outreach, investment, both investment of time and financial and other resources, and enhanced cooperation among all stakeholders, including civil society, the private sector, and other partners. One important point that was made this afternoon was that there is a lot of skepticism around participatory approaches. It is important to phase the introduction of participatory such approaches and their scaling up. We heard too that SDG implementation is a collective responsibility. And to achieve that, we must build trust and awareness, particularly through increased transparency. We must also define results and be clear about the follow-up actions and not a one-time initiative. We should use technology as appropriate to both build awareness, promote accountability and transparency, and engage citizens and others in implementation of the SDGs. And we must change the language and communicate differently around the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. We have to scale up and expand on initiatives by beginning small. We've heard two important examples, in particular one from Tunisia, that started with a single focus but eventually expanded into a much broader objective that resonated in important policy and legislative changes. And then we heard too that the importance of multilateralism in bolstering efforts at the national and the local level. This must undergird those efforts. And multilateralism is accompanied by a sense of shared values which underpin the 2030 development agenda for 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. With those few very brief remarks, I will move very quickly to delivering a closing statement, all protocols having been observed. Madam Moderator and the representatives of the Czech government, ladies and gentlemen, we have indeed come to the end of a very inspiring day of discussions, and we hope that important actions will follow. It is my honor to deliver closing remarks on behalf of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. I would like to thank the President of ECOSOC, Her Excellency Ambassador Shatadova, and the government of the Czech Republic for the hospitality that has greeted us all in this beautiful city and country. I would also like to extend a word of thanks to all of you for staying the course and being here all day for this discussion. Today's discussions have shown that participation of all is not just a talking point. It is a reality reflected in the work of stakeholders across the world. We have had a chance to witness the transformative power of participation for the SDGs. Several of you have shared your inspiring work to better your communities and your countries. And let me highlight three common messages that emerge from our dialogue. First, participation matters, and I might be repeating myself. Secondly, different groups of stakeholders offer unique value added for implementing the agenda. And third, small steps go a long way. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting has confirmed the need to continue to share and to learn from positive experiences to enable new and effective ways to advance participation for the agenda. As we have seen today, stakeholders are already advancing participatory approaches in many different ways. With your dedication and commitment to positive change, sustainable development will indeed become a reality, and hopefully within the time frame to 2030. For this, I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Neil, for those closing remarks. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. And thank you to Ambassador Chatardova and and the Czech government for their wonderful hospitality and in organizing and hosting us at this event today. And last but not least, please remember to be on time at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in front of this building to go on the field trip. So now we will close this meeting, and please enjoy the reception and the rest of your evening. Thank you.